Yeah. So hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Claudia Cardoso. When I started this master, I was just working as an educational psychologist for the British School here in Rio, in Brazil. And soon after starting the master's, I became the head of inclusion as well for the secondary school. So that was really important. And I think this is where I understood how the master's was important to the practice for everything that I was saying. So hope to bring a little bit of this to the presentation today. Next, please. Next slide. So just to put a bit of a context, I work as head of inclusion educational psychologist. So a lot of my work is not only to support students emotionally through mental health, but also neurodiverse learners and to understand how we can improve support for them. I think the main change for me to see within the school setting was to change the mindset, very traditional, to think about student that's lacking something, that it's in need of something, even some learning supports that, that students need something towards the environments. And I think that was open-minded for me in terms of going through that journey that was the master's, to think the school setting as a huge environment. And even though I was having and receiving students with similar diagnosis, for instance, each one of them was different. And why was that? What was involved? And having a look into that and see, instead of seeing where the students are, struggling, what they are striving, what we can do and have that perspective. So changing my perspective towards the students and hopefully change that perspective towards, the school settings, outside specialists, families, and having that sense of whole school. So one of the main things was to understand the school setting as well. And I think, previous presenters already mentioned that having the modules was really good for me to see how each part of the school, so the SLTs and how the school was structured. So the information that I was having and the practice I was seeing, where I could have that knowledge and where we could have that understanding that the experience I'm living in, actually there's some database and there's some research that could back up what I'm saying. So I think this was the main thing from my master's. So next slide, please. So the focus of my research was that to think about the role of educational psychologists. I was very curious about, the school setting in Brazil and how this was going to differentiate in the UK. Even though we are a school in Brazil, our systems is very much UK related. So we are the British school. We do have IPC curriculum in our primary. We do have IGCSEs, and we also have the IBs for secondary students. Systems that we use in school, the wave systems, everything was UK imported. But I wanted to understand how Brazil was going to communicate with that language and what was the difference. So of course, one of the main difference for us in Brazil, the setting, is that, and especially for our school community, all parents have access to outside specialists, private outside specialists. So they don't depend on the school psychologists or educational psychologists in schools to refer to that. They can bring that from outside, from private. So we do have our own NHS, but it's not linked with private schools as it is my setting. So that was a main difference, because then we could have a release and we could speed up and we could have more facilities with that. But one thing that I found that was very uncommon, it was worldwide, was about stigma. And of course, the time I was doing my master's was just through the pandemic. So I think one positive outcome, if we can say that, about the pandemic was that the awareness about mental health was massive. We were all talking about mental health, how was this impacting? We were receiving a huge number of students impacted by that. And that made me think of how much the school could be more preventative. instead of just like tackling fires and having support that we will only reach out for the ones that were actually very much in need, how much we could prevent that and support students before they end up, in crisis or in a very difficult setting. Next slide, please. So from me, I think the most important thing that I've learned was that, how inclusion is relational, how environments impacted that. And that really opened the perspective that we could do something different, because sometimes when you receive a diagnosis, when you have a student that's close to that, you have the feeling that there's nothing can be done because you cannot change the dyslexia, but how we can improve that student's life and beyond school, what adults I'm going to be, bringing to society. And then I need to really make sure that when that student goes to university, many of our students want to study abroad, how we're making sure that we're improving that and implementing that. So beyond their needs, well, where are their strengths and how we can facilitate that. Another conversation as well that was very important, I think, was something that the masters really opened my mind towards, that was that inclusion, mental health. None of that was exclusive to my department or, only psychologists. It was a discussion for everybody. It's for everybody. So the idea that, everybody has a mental health and how we are caring about this, not only staff, but students and families. So really bringing that conversation and really having the whole school take part on that and make sure that we are, seeing that as everybody's responsibility. It felt very lonely when I was, solely taking care of that. So after that, the school really improved in so many areas, and we started discussing and opening, broadening up that area. So we hire more psychologists as well. So having that conversation with staff, it was very important to promote insights and conversations with staff for them to understand that, how they're not alone in that journey, but how can they support the students better. And I know we've mentioned about stigma or difficulties with students with even emotional needs, that they need to leave the classroom. So how we can support our staff to support that and look after them as well. Promote that sense of belonging for students, for them to understand that, yes, this is how they see themselves and whatever they have, but they are beyond that. They're not limited to their diagnosis or stigmatized by it. And trying to implement practices and lessons. And even when I go there to support students or to observe, there's many things that we do for certain students that the whole class benefits. So I think that sense of belonging for all the students, they feel like, we all have a chance to be looked after. We don't need to have something. We all deserve that. And there's so many simple things that can support the whole community. Next slide, please. So that sense of collaboration, preventative support, I think reflective conversations really open that, because secondary setting is very different when compared to primary settings. So many teachers involved in just with just one students. Many teachers have many students, with SND, emotional needs. So they need to be looked after as well, but they need to understand where this is coming from. And I think that sense of belonging to us, it's really important. So just bringing families outside agencies, this is part of, my work to deal with those agencies on a daily basis. So just to make sure that we all have the same goal. And especially I've tried to listen more to the students, which we weren't doing that as much, but how important was that to understand how was that supportive? Because sometimes we could have meetings and understand, how we could support a certain students, but if we don't listen to the students, maybe we are coming to something that it's going to be, important, but not effective. It's not going to make that sense for the students. So understanding what could make sense for the students. So listening to them, make sure they are part of it and they want to change that as well. Next one, please. I think the impact, in the school community is that hearing more of the pupils, sense of belonging, their voice, bringing that community to staff as well, and that understanding that everybody's responsibility, and trying to change a little bit of this whole culture. I think another part of my daily, job and everything that I do at school, and that I felt the need, and I think it was one of the most important things for me for the masters as well. Of course, on the side of like having to read so many papers, but just being presented to white papers, green papers, which I was not familiar with, but understanding the UK setting, the educational setting, where was this coming from? But mostly everything that I was seeing in the practice, the numbers I had, the increase that I had when I started, understanding the numbers, a lot of anxiety and depression when they get older, IGCSEs and IB, how these international exams for us impacts the life of students, transition when they are, coming to us in year 7. All of that, I had that data, but that wasn't that relevant because I didn't have that backup. And I think this is where my postgrad really helped me, not only to navigate to all my coordinators, but to address to SLT and to really present what I was saying, but with a background, because I knew what I was talking about. So I had that background of, what I was reading about. It was not only exclusive to our school, it was, a setting worldwide. So that made sense. So that was relevant. And I think that for me as well, professionally, gave me that background that I knew I was talking about because I had research backing me up, and that made sense. So I think this was one of the main achievements for me professionally, to be able to navigate and to present my ideas and everything that I was learning to with more conviction towards others, because they understood that, this was not coming from nowhere. What I was saying, it was really thought of, and it was in relation to evidence and to researches that I was getting myself familiar with. Next one, please. So just, final reflection, I think it's that the experience and the how, the postgraduate, studies helped me and really helped my practice. I think to connect that theory with the practice and still do with what I do. And most importantly, to continue that growth, you never stop. So this year, for inclusion, so many papers and so many things that for us at school, we are, looking at protocols, implementing new protocols, which we didn't have before. Having a look at all of that side of the school, everything that is written down, how we, have protocols for things. And I think having that backup, and being always updated, this was a sense, a professional sense, that, it was a gap that I had, I think, with my professional life that I didn't have, even with graduation, couldn't bring that to me. But then the master's was able to give me that broad sense, and very interesting because I think I was probably the only one from Brazil, but it was very fulfilling to see that what I was saying, it was not exclusive to my setting, it was everybody going through the same. And how important was that to have that relation. And I think this is, what I was concluding. And even though we were different settings, but how educational psychologists, we could see mental health, we could have the whole school approach. And this was valid and this was important in any setting that we could have. So just starting those conversations and so many things that we do nowadays. And I think we started that way back, by the time I did my master's. So we have, peer mediations and restorative practices. So trying to build that sense of being more proactive, trying to tackle things first, so then we have a healthier community. And I think that's it.